Hey everybody, Douglas Blair Roberts here, the Super Vader 400, the brown skinned human, coming back at you with another video. And this time this is another long overdue, long awaited video that I've been wanting to do for a while, but I've just been too lazy. But finally, it's here. This is my review. This is my review of the entire Killer Instinct franchise. And just like with Eternal Champions, stay tuned at the end. There's a surprise. I'll also at the end give my thoughts on the recently released Killer Instinct game that was released actually 7 years ago. 7 years ago, the Killer Instinct Xbox One game, which is the only reason I even want an Xbox One game. I give my thoughts and rant on that video game. But yeah, I'm a huge fan of Killer Instinct. I consider it one of the best and most underrated fighting game franchises and games of all time. One of the best of all time. And so happy Xbox One revisited, even though it didn't come out as good as I wanted it to. But I'm so happy that they brought it back. Now it's time for my review. This is also yeah. So yeah, it's time for my review. We can do whatever we want if we put our minds to it. With that being said, let's get started right now. Before I continue, I almost forgot. Hold it right there. For those of you who don't know what Killer Instinct is, that was a fighting game franchise, just like Eternal Champion. That was Super Nintendo's fighting game franchise in the 90s. Eternal Champions was the Sega Genesis, was Sega's. Killer Instinct was Nintendo's. It was one of the most highly graphically enhanced games released for the Nintendo. This was one of the earliest and very first almost 3D game. It had 3D environments and graphics, but for the most part 2D gameplay with 3D plane stepping and dodging and circular movement in the arcade. In the arcade version, and I remember back in the 90s seeing this game. Was one of the most highly graphically enhanced games I've seen. Was one of the very first 3D games I played alongside Super Mario Brothers 64 and Donkey Kong Country, which Donkey Kong Country and this were from the same creators. Yeah, the game story is about Ultratech in the near future hosting a tournament called the Killer Instinct Tournament, and various characters have their motivations for participating. But the story mostly revolves around a Tibetan ninja monk hybrid named Jago and his half sister, something like that, Orchid. Jago's destiny is to destroy the Ultratech creation is destroy the Ultratech robot creation, and Black Orchid goes on a mission to expose Ultratech, the sponsors of the Killer Instincts tournaments, their plans delighted in their organization once and for all. And there's several other characters with their own motivations for participating in the great Killer Instinct tournament. Alright, now let's get back to the intro. Hey everybody, this is a rare part of my long Killer Instinct franchise review. This part wasn't initially a part of the review, but I decided to add it at the last minute. This is my review of the Killer Instinct 1994 Power comic book issue titled Killer Instinct, which is just a short promotional comic for the Killer for the 1995, I said 94, 1995 Killer Instinct Killer Instinct based video game, and it talks about Ultratech's hold over the entire city, and shows a battle between the two characters you see on the cover here, Jago and Orchid, where they both use their killer combos, signature maneuvers from the video game. You got Jago using his sword moves and his version of the Shoryuken. I keep forgetting what his dragon punch is called. And you have Orchid using her two swords and transforming into a animal and attacking Jago. Sorry about that. Jago defeats Jago defeats Orchid after a hard battle. Then the chairman of Ultratech, who resembles Kingpin from the Spider-Man and Daredevil franchise, he unveils Ultratech's newest creation, um, Fulgore, and the ultimate battle between Jago and Fulgore officially begins, and the comic book is there. Not as good as the other Killer Instinct comic book series, the 6 issue series adapted by Acclaim, but still a good promotional comic. The comic always gets me hyped to play the video game. To play the video game, artwork is okay, but nowhere near as good in detail as its Acclaim counterpart was, and it doesn't feature all the characters. So yeah, this was the first part of this review. I just added this at the last moment since this was supposed to be the Killer Instinct franchise review. Now it's time for the rest of the franchise. This is my review of the very first Killer Instinct game that was released in arcades in 1994 and later ported on the Super Nintendo in 1995. This is one of my, like I said in part one, this is one of my all-time favorite fighting games, and this is actually one of the very first fighting games I've ever played. All of my friends at the time, back in 1995 and 96, had this video game right here, Killer Instinct. I still remember the epic promo from 1995, which you can find on YouTube. Coming to your home systems, Super Entertainment Systems in 1995. Killer Instinct, that awesome trailer. Um, like I said, this is fighting games, one of the best fighting games ever. There were so many innovations with this game right here. Innovations with this game right here that will be seen in other fighting games, or actually would not be seen in other fighting games. It would only be unique to this particular fighting game right here. But before I get to that, let's talk about the graphics. The graphics of this game were the graphics of this was also one of, alongside Super Mario Brothers 64, Donkey Kong Country, and yeah, and those three games. This was the very first full length 3D game I've ever played. Every other game at the time, while everyone else had moved on to 3D games, I was still in the 2D fourth generation fourth generation era. So but this right here was the first full length 3D game I've seen, and to this day, I am still surprised that um, the Super Nintendo, generation, a fourth generation console, 2D console, was able to feature this high tech 3D fighting game, Killer Instinct, on that small 2D hard drive cartridge based console. To this day, I am still surprised they were able to do that. I like both versions, the with the arcade version being superior. I think the sequel, Killer Instinct Gold, which is an adaptation of Killer Instinct 2, is the best version. But this version right here is, of course, the most memorable. Now let's get to the storyline of this. Let's get to the storyline of this game. The storyline is set in a futuristic 1995. Ultratech is a very powerful mega corporation which organizes a tournament called the Killer Instinct. Along with along with regular participants, there are several experimental creatures created by Ultratech. Ultratech, including alien being, one alien being, and Ultratech also has discovered the technology to open dimensions, and they release a two-headed cyclops like monster called Idol, who from his dimensional prison in Limbo, who of course Idol serves as the overall main antagonist and final boss of the game of the game. Multiple people have their reason for participating in the Killer Instinct tournament, but the storyline mostly revolves around the main protagonist of Killer Instinct, my boy Jago, one of the coolest protagonists in video games, even cooler and better than Liu Kang and Ryu, in my opinion. Even though those two characters I just mentioned are far more memorable than this character because of their multiple multimedia based appearances. But Jago, he is a Tibetan monk with the appearance of a ninja, who can shoot. Well, I'll talk about that later. With the appearance of a ninja, who it is his he fights for fun and spiritual enlightenment, but it's also his destiny to destroy the Ultratech's secret weapon for the robotic predator like android Fulgar, sub antagonist and sub boss, secondary antagonist and sub boss of the Killer Instinct video game and franchise. Other characters, other characters, other characters include Glacius, an alien, an alien captured by Ultratech, and an ice alien who was captured by Ultratech and is promised freedom if he of course wins the tournament. Um, then there's Cinder, a um, a a convicted criminal who is promised early parole for in exchange for participating in a tournament and participating in Ultratech's chemical weapons research, which turns him into a human comprised mostly of flames, a fire being similar to the human Human Torch. He has promised a return to his original form if he is able to defeat Glacius in the if he's able to defeat Glacius in the tournament. He, however, fails and is one of the only characters from the first game to be killed and not return in the sequel. Then, of course, you got what's the guy's name? Then you got the secondary, the other main character, Black Orchid, who is secretly Jago's sister in the tournament. That's not revealed till the second game. Her mission is to oh yeah is to infiltrate the Ultratech organization and bring their secret plans to the light. And she is the one, ultimately, much to my surprise, I didn't know this, she's the one to defeat the character of Idol, the overall main antagonist of the game. But this leads to something else in the sequel that I'm going to talk about in the next review, Killer Instinct 2, Killer Instinct Gold. Um, yeah. Then of course there's Chief Thunder. There's Chief Thunder. Who enters the tournament to find what happened to his missing brother Eagle. Then there's TJ Combo, one of the other secondary main characters and prominent characters in the Killer Instinct franchise, a former heavyweight boxing champion who was stripped of the title after it was discovered that he had cybernetic implants in his arms, and he is and in exchange for participating in the tournament, he is promised he is promised his belt and the prize money now that he's no longer able to fight in boxing anymore. And then there's various other characters like Saber Wolf, a werewolf who wants to participate in the tournament to find a cure for his to find a cure to turn him back into human. There's Riptor, a giant dinosaur based creature created by Ultratech. Then there's Spinal, an animated skeleton reanimated by Ultratech, and also wants a cure for wants a cure, wants to be turned back into a human. So yeah, those are all of the characters. Then there's Fulgore himself, the cybernetic robot, the cybernetic predator inspired robot created by Ultratech, and subs as the sub boss of the game and is Jago's rival. So yeah, that's the entire storyline and characters of Killer Instinct. My favorite characters are Jago, Glacius, Cinder. These are my top three favorite characters to play as, followed by TJ Combo, Orchid, Chief Thunder, and yeah, my favorite characters are to fight are Fulgore, Idol, Spinal, Riptor, Cinder, and Glacius. These are my all-time favorite characters to fight. And yeah, so yeah. Now let's get to the gameplay. Um, the gameplay, the gameplay, the gameplay of this game, like I said, was very different from any other fighting game at the time. Not only was it one of the very, very first 3D fighters, but this game right here, instead of having two rounds, one to three, 2 out of 3 rounds of combat, this has one full round with two life bars. Whoever is the first to defeat their opponent's life bar wins the fight, making the combat much more realistic making it much more combat, much more realistic than other games of the series. So instead of 2 rounds, it's just one giant no holds barred fight. Then what else about this game? Another thing this game pioneered were combos, and there are three different. There's killer, hyper, and ultra combos. I've pulled off the killer and hyper combos, but I've never pulled off an ultra base combo, which is a combo followed by a special maneuver. Um then of course there's the like other particular fighting time, you select your character, you fight your way through the tournament, you defeat Fulgore and Idol, the overall main antagonists of the game, and you see what that character did afterwards. In the Super Nintendo version, if you defeat it on an easier setting, the game will mock you and tell you to try a much harder difficulty setting. If you defeat it on a higher difficulty setting, you'll get these lame. These are the things I didn't like about the game. You'll get these lame comical endings featuring several characters, particularly Idol, with his ending being a parody of Blanca's ending from Street Fighter 2, and I think that's just absolutely terrible. My favorite endings are Jago's, Combos, and Glacius's endings. These are my all-time favorite endings of Killer Instinct. I like all the endings, all the real endings, not those lame not those lame comedy based endings. Um and what else about this game? Both the arcade and Super Nintendo version are for the most part the exact same game with a couple of differences. The arcade version has even though it's 2D gameplay, the arcade version has different camera angles, giving the game 3D like movement, because the camera works in a circular direction, whereas the SNES version, due to cartridge constraints, is a straight up 2D fighter with 3D graphics. Um, what else about this game? And oh yeah, the video game itself is a cross between Street Fighter and Mortal Kombat. It has the in-depth core fighting system of Street Fighter, and the fast-paced, exciting, over-the-top action and gratuitous violence of Mortal Kombat. It even has its own fatalities, I think, called overkills. I think overkills where you execute the person. My favorite is the one where you knock the person, where you're on top of a building, where you're at Orchid and Cinder stage, and you knock the person on Orchid, Spinal, and Cinder stage, where you knock the person off that bridge and they fall onto a car or onto a hard ground below. And another one where another which is a road runner, where they fall into a ground and make a cartoon imprint on the ground, are my all-time favorite fatalities. Fatalities here. Fatalities here are, in my opinion, better than the ones in Mortal Kombat. And Jago, the main character of the game, is a hybrid of Sub-Zero, Liu Kang, and Ryu. Like Liu Kang, is his destiny to destroy Ultra Tech and win Killer Instinct. Like Ryu, he uses the Dragon Punch, the Dragon Punch uppercut, and the Hadouken, which he calls Endoken in this game. He even has an upgraded evil form called Shadow Jago. Glacius, my second favorite character, is pretty much the Sub-Zero of this game, and is Iceman from Marvel on steroids, a mutant version of Iceman. And then you got my third favorite character, Cinder, who is pretty much a hybrid of the Human Torch, Scorpion from Mortal Kombat, and with elements of Deadpool, because he apparently, like, according to his bio, likes to joke and mock people. Thanks, Killer Instinct Wiki. Next is then there's Combo, boxer. He's the Balrog, Jax, Evander Holyfield, and Tyson of Killer Instinct, with elements of Blade from the video game Eternal Champions. Even Jax's video game actor John Parrish portrays combo via motion capture in this video game, which is another thing I like about this game. This game was one of the very first games to use the motion capture technology. Um, real actors, with CGI drawn and colored over them, performing moves. So yeah, that was one of the things I loved about this video game, and now that's used a lot in movies now, which this was used here in video games is not only used in video games, but that's used in movies now. So yeah, Killer Instinct, very revolutionary game, man. The entire storyline, like I said, was adapted into a comic book, which is coming next. So yeah, that was Killer Instinct. The only thing I don't like about this game, besides those cartoonish endings and the extreme difficulty, is this game has a storyline, but no story mode. No story mode. No story or beat 'em up base mode. So that's the only thing I don't like. The only thing I don't like about fighters in general, especially fighters from this era, this time period. So yeah, Killer Instinct, one of the best games ever. So happy I found it again on playretros.com. The links to both of these games will be in the description box below for those of you who want to play. Well, I'm finished with this portion. Now it's time to move on to the comic books. All right, now it's time. Now it's time for the third part of my Killer Instinct franchise review. And this time, I'm talking about the Killer Instinct comic books, the ones produced by the now defunct Acclaim comic books, which adapts the very first Killer Instinct game, Killer Instinct 1994 and 1995 for Super Nintendo base players, and does a really good job of adapting the video game, only deviating from the video game in a couple of areas. This comic book right now, in my opinion, alongside the Street Fighter and Capcom based comic books, this comic book right here, in my opinion, is the best comic book based upon a video game. It has the storyline, it has the video game storyline, the action. The action was always a big problem with these comics, not having the complete action that their video game counterparts had. But it has all the action and special maneuvers, and it succeeds where the video game failed, and that was connecting each fighter's storyline to one gigantic storyline that spanned 6 issues. Issues 1 through 5 were the best, with issue 6 being the exact being the weakest of the series, and I'm gonna explain why now. Like I said, in the comic book, just like in the video game, Ultratech has a powerful hold on the city, and they have experimented on various humans and sponsor the Killer Instinct based tournament, and they have regular participants participating, but also superly enhanced beings participating. Some of them are experiments created by Ultratech. One such being is captured from outer space after his ship crash landed here on Earth. And that right there is my boy Glacius. So yeah, the comic book, the first issue stars the characters TJ Combo and Jago, with Combo appearing more so than Jago. TJ Combo destroys. TJ Combo easily defeats Riptor, then beats the living daylights out of Spinal. Oh, Terry Spinal. literally tearing Spinal to pieces, and then the final, then then his story arc ends with him getting the living daylights beat out of him by Fulgore, the first version of Fulgore. Then then Fulgore. Then the last panel has Jago, just like his video game counterpart, sitting in a room meditating, and sitting in a temple, meditating and communicating with the tiger spirit. So yeah, like I said, completely true to the game. Then you got Killer Instinct issue 2, where Orchid is introduced. So is Chief Thunder. So is Chief Thunder, and the character Idol and the chairman of Ultratech, who, like I said, resembles Kingpin from the Spider-Man and Daredevil based comic books. Anyway, in this comic book right here, Jago fights for the first time, defeating Saberwolf after a hard battle, but getting wounded in the process, which this plays a bigger part in the next comic book. In the next comic book, then Orchid fights and defeats Chief Thunder after a hard fought battle. These two characters are good guys and try to brutally kill each other with their special base maneuvers, but Orchid gets the upper hand with a cool killer combo, beats the living daylights out of Chief Thunder. Then Orchid Orchid in the final battle defeats Fulgore and appears to win the tournament, but it's not over yet. The chairman, just like in the video game, opens the portal, and here comes the three-headed monster Idol. The 2 to 3 headed monster Idol, and the comic book ends there. Then issue 3 features the good guys, Jago, Orchid, and Chief Thunder's battle with not only Idol but Ultratech 6, Riptor, Spinal, and Glacius. I can't remember if Cinder was with them. And Glacius on their tail. Meanwhile, Meanwhile, TJ Combo is watching from the audiences and notices that that's his tech that they're using. That's his tech they're using to create the Fulgore, and remembers he's one of the good guys and joins Jago, Orchid, and Chief Thunder in fending off Idol, Spinal, Glacius, and Riptor by punching the living daylights out of Glacius. Then TJ then Jago does battle with Riptor, while Orchid does battle with, I think, with one of the another Fulgore unit, before finally fighting Idol himself, with both Jago and Orchid defeating Idol by sending him back into the portal, much to his dismay, who he pleads with them, please do not send me back into the portal. Then that comic book ends there in issue 3. Issue 4 centers around Jago. It starts off with Jago defeating Saberwolf defeating Riptor in the tournament. Where he says the funniest line in the comic book: "By the tiger, does anyone in your family have good smelling breath?" And he wins the battle, but is later hospitalized because of a wound created by Saberwolf, which causes Jago to mutate into a monster. Saberwolf also has an extended role in this comic where he's trying to find a cure for his wolf condition, which lines up with his video game counterpart. He's competing in a tournament to be turned back to normal, and he drinks some liquid that instead mutates him into a green monster, and Orchid beats the living daylights out of the chairman's assistant, who is a woman with bloodying her up, demanding to know where the witch's name is, and the the Ultratech chairman convinces Orchid to stop. When he tells her he's paying for Jago's long expensive medical bill, and and issue four, issue four and five centers around the character Glacius, who was introduced much earlier. His story is introduced with him crash landing on Earth and being trapped by the Earthlings, Ultra Tech, and forced to compete in a tournament if he wants his freedom. Here we also meet. Here he also meets Cinder, and this is where the storyline begins to diverge from the comic book. In the video game. In the video game storyline, Glacius fights Cinder in the tournament and earns his freedom. Here, Glacius and Cinder start off as friends, sparring and training together. It's not until Glacius accidentally spills water and ice on Cinder, which severely hurts him, and Cinder swears vengeance. But later on, when Glacius tries to escape on his own, Ultra Tech sends various various enhanced beings to stop them, and both of them fight side by side with Ultra Tech coming out of nowhere with a tank, and the tank shooting at Glacius, but Cinder jumps in the way, taking the blast from Glacius and peacefully dying in Glacius's arms, in one of the most dramatic and emotional deaths in not only video game comic books, but comic books in general. Such an awesome story, an awesome death had to take place in a comic book a lot of people didn't read because Acclaim quickly went out of business. But anyway, let's continue with this comic book right here. And yeah, so this is where the game. This is where the comic book diverges from the game. This and earlier, Chief Thunder fights and loses to Orchid in the tournament, but according to the video game, I remember him crushing Spine, or maybe that was in part two. Maybe that was in Killer Instinct 2. I can't remember. I definitely remember TJ Combo defeating Spinal in the tournament, but I don't know if it was I don't know if it was Thunder who defeated him in the first game in a street fight, or it was it the second game where he defeated him. Anyway, let's continue. So this is where, but the Glacius and Cinder one is where the game diverges. The game diverges, and Glacius then goes back home. In Killer Instinct issue 6, the weakest issue of the Killer Instinct comic book, we get the character Chief Thunder, who fights in the tournament to find his missing brother. We later learn is one of the Fulgors. After defeating the Fulgors, him and his brother have a peaceful reunion. And the comic book ends there. Like I said, awesome comic book, one of the best to be based upon video games. The story, action, comedy, fate, overkill, and the fatalities, the executions, the fatalities, and the characters. Each character looks and acts like his or her video game counterpart. It has the killer action, the killer combos instead of one or two hit fights, which you see in most video game based comic books. This has the full length action scene in all of the video games, and for the most part only diverging in a certain areas. For the most part, it's completely true to the first video game. My only problem was there wasn't even more. We never really got a real resolution of Jago's storyline, and they never adapted Killer Instinct 2 Gold, where the storyline got even bigger. So yeah, that was my review of the Killer Instinct comic books. Killer Instinct comic books. Now the final game in the series, Killer Instinct Gold. One more thing I forgot. The links to these comic books will be in the description box. The links to review these comic books will be in the description box below. Since of course, Mortal Kombat Comics YouTube channel, who had Killer Instinct and all these rare and cool comic books, since his channel got taken down, a new website has preserved his and various other people's work, various other comic books. I'll give you the link to that website. I will also be uploading this comic book to various social media based platforms, and video sharing websites. So yeah, I forgot to mention that part. So yeah, and I'll definitely do a remake of the comic book where I will narrate the comic book and review the comic book as you read along, as you watch and read along with me. So yeah, now let's finish up with Killer Instinct Gold and that huge surprise I was talking about at the end. Hey everybody, it's time for the next part of my long Killer Instinct franchise review and rant, and this time I'm talking about Killer Instinct Gold for the Nintendo 64, which of course is an adaptation of the second game, Killer Instinct 2. Killer Instinct 2. I like both versions with, in my opinion, the Killer Instinct Gold version being superior, better camera angles and better visuals. I do, however, like most fans, hate the lack of the restricted CGI cutscenes due to limitations on the cartridge. But I think the console port is way better than the arcade port. I also think this game right here is the best Killer Instinct. Like I said, the very first one is the most memorable, but I think this video game right here was way better. Was way better. While it's missing a couple of characters from the previous series, um um more new characters like Maya and Tusk, and of course um Maya, Tusk, and the new boss character Garganos. And a much bigger and better storyline. So yeah, storyline. So yeah, so I'm gonna start off with the storyline. Then I'm gonna get to then I'm gonna talk about the gameplay, and what I liked and didn't like about this video game right here. So with that being said, let's get started right now. According to Wikipedia, Killer Instinct 2 follows on where the first installment left off. Idol's death at the hands of Black Orchid accidentally set off a time warp, transporting some of the combatants back in time and allowing the demon lord Garganos um to escape from limbo. Now trapped 2,000 years in the past, the warriors that survived the previous Killer Instinct tournament, along with several new faces, fight for the right to face Garganos in combat. Each character has survived the journey from the first game and have corresponding backstories. So yeah, this time there is no tournament or prize money, just a fight to the finish, with the fate of the future hanging in the balance. So in this game, one of the things I like in the previous game, which was a tournament, now it's an all-out war and an all-out battle to stop Garganos for the fate of the future, as I just said in the so yeah, let's continue. The characters returning are Black Orchid, um, Jago, Saberwolf, Spinal, and TJ Combo. A new version of Glacius appears where he I'll talk about that later. Glacius appears. So does a newly enhanced and created Fulgore who was destroyed in the previous tournament. Um Black Orchid, she destroys Idol in the first tournament, and now she seeks to destroy Gargados and find a way back home. TJ Combo, in the original tournament, he wanted the prize money he wanted the prize money and his belt and his championship belt back. Now he just wants to fight to get home. Jago, the main character, succeeded in destroying Fulgor in the first tournament after being possessed and betrayed by the tiger spirit, which turned out to be the demon Garganos in disguise. Um, Jago seeks revenge against Jago seeks revenge against Garganos. Saber Wolf, the wolf character from the previous game, wants to get a cure, still wants to get a cure for his transformation, and um Spinal just now fights for vengeance and his freedom. So yeah, the new characters include Kim Woo is an Eastern martial artist who is a descendant of the heroes who long ago banished Idol and Garganos from the world. To protect her people and fulfill the destiny of her bloodline, she seeks to destroy Garganos forever. Maya is an Amazonian queen and one of the original heroes who were responsible for banishing Idol and Garganos. Exiled by her people after Garganos reappear, her goal is to destroy the demon lord once and for all and regain her standing. Tuss is a legendary barbarian, the warrior champion of the ancient world. Undefeated in his own time, he now comes to strike down all of the challenges in belief that it will earn him the right to face Garganos. Yeah, that's the storyline and the character. Now let's talk about the gameplay. The gameplay is the same. It's pretty much just the same as the original. It's the same as the original as its previous NES port, Super Nintendo port. But in this version, due to the fact it's on a more high-tech console, it has the exact same gameplay as the arcade, meaning it has the camera, the switching, the constantly changing camera angle, something that was lacking in the previous Super Nintendo port. So the SNES port. So that's what I like. I mentioned all the characters who return. I also like the brand new outfits the characters have. Jago, while his default costume is a upgraded version of his previous costume from the previous game. In this game right here, he has a very cool white. He has a very cool white skin tight jumpsuit, and TJ Combo has some green military pants, which I think is way better than the first one. Glacius is heavily redesigned and given feet in this game, and yeah, and yes, and so yeah, and those are the enhancements those are the enhancements I like, besides the story mode, the brand new storyline, and the brand new characters. Now for what I didn't like about this game. This game is even tougher and harder than the previous Killer Instinct video game I'm playing right now. I have a hard time getting up the ladder. I've beaten the very first game. I've never beaten this game right here. And right now I'm stuck on TJ Combo, who I'm fighting right now. That's the that's one of the things I didn't like. The second thing I didn't like about this game was the extreme the second thing I like about this game was the lack of a story mode. You have a brand new storyline, an even bigger storyline than the first one. But once again, no actual story mode. You just fight your way through the tournament ladder, beat Garganos, and see what that character did after the tournament. Now, here's the third part I didn't like. Not only does this game have endings, but they have multiple endings, and instead of giving you one canonical ending, they give you several what if endings depending on several conditions that are met in the game, such as performing Killer Instinct overkills, which is what they call them, overkills on various people, fatalities on various people. If you if you perform these tasks, you'll see 3 different endings, which makes the storyline much confusing. Then you don't know which ending was canon because there was never a Killer Instinct 3. The fourth problem I have with this game, Rare. Well, I said I was going to talk about. I'm going to talk about this later. I'm going to talk about Rare not making another Killer Instinct later, but the not making another Killer Instinct kind of ruined the storyline of this game because we never got a legitimate continuation. Next thing I didn't like about this game, so yeah, those are the things I didn't like about this game. One final thing I did like about this game was the battle stages. The battle stages here were even better than the ones in my opinion in the previous game. And I like the improvised graphics. And the what else did I like about this game? Oh yeah, Orchid and TJ Combo's stage, which they have the best background things besides the mainstream Killer Instinct thing itself. And this game has an overall better soundtrack than its predecessor, Killer Instinct '94. So yeah, this has been my review of Killer Instinct Gold. And one final thing I didn't like about this game was the character Cinder from the previous game doesn't return in this game. That's because it was revealed he was killed by glaciers in the previous he was killed by glaciers in the previous the first glaciers in the previous game. So that's why he's not here in this game. But like I said, this game is my opinion one of the best fighting games around and one of the best games on one of the best fighters on the N64. Never got around to getting this game when it was released back in the 90s, but I've been meaning to get it for several years now, but I found it here on PlayRetroGames.com, and boy, it's an awesome game, and I'm finally happy I got to play it again so I can complete my Killer Instinct franchise review and rant. So with that being said, I'm done. Now I'm gonna give you my thoughts. Now I'm gonna talk about that big surprise. Now I'm gonna rant on the lack of I'm gonna give my thoughts on the brand new Killer Instinct video game that came out in 2013, and also talk about the big surprise that I mentioned in the webcam portion of this review right here. So with that being said, I'm finished. This is my thoughts on the Killer Instinct. This is my thoughts on the Killer Instinct 2013. 2013 video game and that huge surprise I was talking about at the beginning in the webcam portion of this video. Well, yeah, the 2013 Killer Instinct game, which I've seen various playthroughs, trailers of. The video game looks awesome. The video game looks awesome. The video game is pretty much a cross between Street Fighter 4 and Mortal Kombat 2011, except gameplay wise, I think the video game is bigger and better than both of them. However, I do have problems with this game. Number one, the first problem I have with this game is that other than the enhanced graphics and the slowed down gameplay, which that part I do not like, that they slowed down the gameplay. Killer Instinct was supposed to be about speed and accuracy, and they slowed down the gameplay to try to make it more real. That was one of the first things I didn't like. But apart from those two things, Killer Instinct is the same video game it was several years ago. It was, now when I say I'm talking about that, it was back in 94 and 95. It's the same video game. Then a video game from 1995 had more characters and more content than a video game from 2013, and this was criticized. This video game was starting off season 1 only had about 5 to 7 base characters, and you had to pay for the rest of the other characters who were introduced through a seasonal package type type mode, more downloadable content nonsense. One of the biggest things I hate about the seventh and eighth generation video game console wars. Next, they didn't improve anything from the previous versions, such as one of the coolest things they did was added actual voice acting. However, the cutscenes, they didn't connect any cutscenes. They didn't have any story mode like Mortal Kombat 2011 to connect each fighter's storyline um to one gigantic storyline. It's just an arcade campaign mode where you see what the character did after the Ultra Tech tournament. Next thing um so yeah, that was the next thing I didn't like. No gameplay modes. It's just an arcade mode, online mode, a versus mode, and trading mode, and that's just about it. No real gameplay modes. Next, characters who have no business in the franchise. Well, I'm happy to see one of the Battletoads guest stars in this video game. Well, I'm happy to see him here. Well, I'm happy to see the Battletoad here in a video game, making an appearance in a video game in the 2010s. Um, the I want their reason for the Battletoads to be here, except for the fact the only reason he's here is that he's a rare exclusive OG. I want a legitimate storyline reason why he's in the Killer Instinct universe than just to get more money out of people, just to get more money out of people in because he's a Killer Instinct OG. So that was the next problem I had. What was the last problem? What was the last problem I had? But other than that, the video game looks good. The video game looks good. And whenever I get a Xbox One, which the Xbox One, even though the PlayStation 4 is much better in this generation, in my opinion, the Xbox One is cheaper to buy, and this is one of the first games. This is one of the first games. This is one of the first games I want, and I'm gonna get when I get an eighth generation base console. And one of the other reasons I'm getting this game, despite my various disappointments and criticisms, number one is Killer Instinct, and I'm a huge fan. I've been wanting this forever. And I felt if I got this game, they would make a better game, and it would have led to other things in the Killer Instinct. It would lead to other things in the Killer Instinct franchise, which I'm going to talk about that in a moment. But one other thing, so yeah, there was something else. There was something else I was gonna criticize about the Killer Instinct franchise. Man, I can't even remember what it was. So yeah, that's Killer Instinct 2013. There was something else, but I can't remember what it was. The next thing, oh yes, now I remember. The other problem I had was the actual storyline itself. The storyline is a reboot of the Killer Instinct franchise of using elements of the original two games. I wanted a legitimate sequel to Killer Instinct 2. I wanted to know who won the battle of Killer Instinct 2. Killer Instinct 2 gave you a series of what if endings that were only unlocked via special conditions completed in the video game, but they never really told you who won Killer Instinct 2. So yeah, instead we get a loosely reimagining of the Killer Instinct franchise. I wanted them to do that in the future when they were done telling the original story, not now. So yeah, other cooler things about Killer Instinct was this very awesome comic book, which I've read a couple of issues of, which which um which this comic is on par with the Marvel, DC, and Mortal Kombat 11 based comic books. But I found the original Acclaim based comics from the 90s to be much more exciting and entertaining. So this is one of the reasons I said I was gonna get the Killer Instinct. It led to awesome stuff like this. Then, last but not least, I mentioned the surprise. I'm a cartoonist and screenwriter. I'm developing a new Killer Instinct comic book. A new, I'm also developing a script for a Killer Instinct movie based franchise and a Saturday morning cartoon. All the things they should have done back in 95 when they were hugely popular and just chose not to do. I want to try all of them. I want to try all of them now. I for years waited for and wanted Hollywood or someone else to do this. Why don't I do this? Why don't I do this? The writing and drawing part, I can do that part now. I can do that part. I can do that part now. So yeah, that was the big surprise I was talking about. That was the big surprise I was talking about in the webcam portion. Well, I'm finished for now. If you don't want to hear the rest of the music, turn the video off. Right? Turn the video off. Right. Turn the video off. Right now.